There's two things in life that you can always count on. One, the sun will always rise. And two, Bungie's going to continue to keep bringing back Destiny 1 exotics into Destiny 2. With the addition of Necrochasm this season, as well as 3 more exotics coming in Final Shape that were announced during the Final Shape reveal, I figured this would be a perfect time to go over all of the exotics from Destiny 1 that have not yet returned to Destiny 2. If you end up finding this video interesting, make sure to hit the like button, and if you're new, go and subscribe, as we'd love to have you, and I just want to say I appreciate you guys and I love you guys. Now let's dive right into the nostalgia. We'll start off with the Destiny vanilla weapons. I think it's only right that we start off with the Pulse Rifle, the Red Death. The Pulse Rifle that we know is coming back in Final Shape per the reveal announcement. I gotta be honest, with Crimson being in the game, I thought that all but guaranteed that this weapon would never return to Destiny 2. Shows how much I know. For those unfamiliar with Destiny 1, you may not understand why I said this. Well, after I tell you what Red Death does, it's all gonna become clear. The perk on this Pulse Rifle was called the Red Death, and with each kill it would heal you and speed up your reload. Sound familiar? In an era where healing rifts, healing nades, and wells didn't exist, this weapon was amazing.
Are you playing my favorite game, Raid Shadow Legends?
Yes, we are, Mr. Raidsicle. This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is introducing an insanely strong 6-headed, yes I said 6-headed boss called the Hydra. It has a head of suffering, which when you damage the head it can share the pain with you, and a head of torment that makes you lose access to your skills and skips your turn. And there's still 4 other heads with crazy abilities. My favorite part about Raid Shadow Legends is how many champions you have available at your disposal so you can tailor your champions to your playstyle. My favorite champion is Soul Drinker from the Demon Spawn. And if you like free champions, Raid is offering a free legendary champion, Sun Wukong. All you have to do is log into Raid on 7 different days between August 22nd and October 23rd. Raid is also adding a brand new rarity to champions called Mythical that have a special new mechanic called Metamorph. Use promo code JTSkin before October 7th and you'll get one of the best epic champions, the Stag Knight, as well as a skin for him designed by JonTron himself. Also click on the link or scan my QR code on the screen and you'll get access to a free starter pack with really cool in-game loot. Thank you so much again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the exotics. Let's move on to one of the most game-breaking weapons in Destiny 1. Now when I mention this weapon, if you just started in Destiny 2, you may not understand why this weapon was so special, and that's because now we live in an era of double special. If you want to rock 2 shotguns, you can. If you want to rock a special weapon in your kinetic slot and a primary weapon in your energy slot, no problem. However, this is not Destiny 2. In Destiny 1, we had 3 slots: primary, special, and heavy. All primary weapons were in the primary slot, all secondary weapons were in the special slot, and naturally, all heavy weapons were in the heavy slot, except for 2. And the Universal Remote was one of those weapons. Don't want to waste your special slot on a shotgun? No problem, because the Universal Remote had you covered. Its exotic perk was called Universal Remote, which greatly increased range and precision damage when aiming down sights. Definitely really cool, but the main appeal was having this weapon in the primary slot. A lot of that appeal wouldn't exist in Destiny 2 today. Let's move on to the vanilla special weapons, and we're gonna start off with one of the most powerful weapons in Destiny history, the Icebreaker. This was a weapon that could make a Nightfall go from impossible to an absolute breeze. Imagine having a super strong, overpowered sniper that makes its victims spontaneously combust, dealing damage to everyone around that you didn't need to reload, that generated its own ammo. Oh yeah, that's the Icebreaker. Icebreaker will always be one of the most legendary exotics in Destiny history. That idea of generating ammo sounds interesting. I wonder if we could have that on a shotgun. Well, it already exists. Say hello to the Invective, the shotgun that, yes, you heard it right, could regenerate ammo. This weapon didn't quite have the status of Icebreaker, but it was an insane weapon nonetheless. Next, we had another fan favorite. I feel like I'm going to be saying fan favorite a lot, and that's because exotic weapons in Destiny 1 were so scarce. So whatever you got, you pretty much used, so everybody kind of had an attachment to a different weapon. The exotic I was referring to is called the Patience and Time. This exotic was awesome. The exotic perk was called Patience and Time, which allowed you to gain active camouflage while aiming down sights, aka invisibility. This was awesome for PvE and PvP alike in Destiny 1. A super cool weapon. Not sure if this weapon would have fully had a home in Destiny 2, but it was really fun in Destiny 1. Next, let's move on to an exotic that doesn't get talked about as much, but one that people really enjoyed in Destiny 1, the Plan C Fusion Rifle. The perk Plan C allows you to shorten your charge and equip times immediately after a weapon swap. This was really cool back in the day and allowed for a super fast fire, but in today's Destiny 2, with how far fusion rifles have come, I don't see this having much of a home in Destiny 2 without a major rework. Staying on the topic of fusion rifles, let's now talk about the fusion rifle that everyone's waiting to hear about. One of the most broken weapons in Destiny history, and the only weapon that was sunset in Destiny 1 Year 1 and that wasn't brought back into Destiny 1 later in any shape or form. the Pocket Infinity. What do I even say about this weapon? You just really had to be there. The exotic perk Pocket Infinity allows the weapon to fire in full auto mode and had a chance to return rounds that missed to the magazine. Absolutely busted. A full auto, fast firing, ammo regenerating if you miss beast of a weapon. That's why this weapon is regarded as one of the most broken weapons in the history of our game. Next, let's talk about one of my favorite weapons to use when I was going through Vault of Glass, the Super Good Advice. What a beast of an LMG this was. I remember this making short work of oracles and anything else that was in front of it as well. I loved the exotic perk because it was great for people who can't aim, like me. It was called Super Good Advice, which made it where almost all shots that you missed returned to the magazine. Revoker may have taken some advice from this. Let's move on to the Dark Below exotics. Remember those two weapons I was talking about that completely broke the way we played? Well, one of those weapons was Universal Remote, and the second that I would argue was even slightly more popular is the No Land Beyond, the only primary sniper in Destiny 1. This was an absolute fan favorite, and any Destiny PvP montage usually at least featured one clip with No Land, if not many. It may not have looked like much, but it was a beast. The exotic perk was called the Master, and what it does is it increased precision damage. Kills also briefly increase damage against your next target. This is another weapon that would be pretty average in Destiny 2, but I can't stress enough how good this weapon was in Destiny 1. The only other weapon that didn't return in Dark Below, and by the way, there were only 3 Dark Below weapons, and one of them was Necrochasm, which just returned this season, was the Dragon's Breath rocket launcher. This fiery rocket would essentially shoot a dragon's breath that would continually burn the ground that it hit. The exotic perk was called Pyromancer, which made it where each round fired by this weapon would leave a solar flare upon detonation. Another added bonus was this weapon had tripod. It felt great having 3 rockets ready to shoot at all times. It'll be fun to see how this weapon performs against other Destiny 2 rocket launchers like the Apex Predator and the Hothead. Now before we jump to Taken King, there's one more expansion that we need to talk about, the House of Wolves. Let's start off with one that I used a ton in Crucible, the Dreg's Promise, or sometimes known as the Trade's Promise. This was a weapon that was a beyond the grave killing machine that normally would take your opponent with you even if they outgunned you. Its exotic perk is called Shock Rounds, which gave the gun high ricochet shock rounds which enhanced target acquisition. You would get this weapon from Prison Elders back in the day. Admittedly, I didn't use this weapon much until year 3 when the Trials of Osiris meta shifted because you no longer could spawn in with special ammo, so everybody had to use sidearms. And that's the only weapon that hasn't returned from House of Wolves. The other 2 were the Queenbreaker's Bow and the Lord of Wolves. Moving on to the Taken King, let's start off with another fan favorite. The Risk Runner, I mean the totally better, stronger, big sibling, the Zalo Supercell. The Risk Runner is the second coming of this weapon, but I think a lot of Destiny veterans still miss their beloved Zalo Supercell. Unlike the Wrist Runner, the Zalo Supercell was an auto rifle. The exotic perk is called Bolts of the Blue, which makes it where when you get double kills, it charges a small amount of your super and also returns ammo to the magazine. It essentially turned you into an art killing machine. Not sure if this will ever return with Wrist Runner existing, but stranger things have happened. Next, let's talk about an exotic that I feel like is pretty much forgotten about when people talk about Destiny 1 exotics that they want to see return. The good old Boolean Gemini. For my programmers out there, this is for you. 2 different exotic perks. If one is active, then the other is not. The first is called One Way, which gives bonus agility on precision kills, which can stack up 3 times. The second exotic perk is called Or Another, which gives bonus armor on non-precision kills. This also stacks up to 3. I don't have much else to say about this exotic. It was cool. Moving on, let's go over the class exclusive exotics. Bungie, please bring class exotic weapons back. Let's talk about the Fabian strategy and the Tlaloc. Ace of Spades was the Hunter class exotic and that already came back. Ripcade, I guess, or maybe not because he's already back, or I don't really know, but you know what I mean. Let's start off with the Fabian strategy. This was a Titan exclusive auto rifle. The exotic perk was called Front Lines, which increased handling, stability, and the rate of fire when enemies were close. Kills automatically reloaded a portion of the magazine as well. It was a cool weapon, and it also had life support, which I really liked as a Titan. Tlaloc, on the other hand, was the Warlock exclusive scout rifle. The exotic perk was called Overflow, so it would overfill your magazine when you stepped on ammo just like Destiny 2. Just kidding, that would be pretty lackluster. The exotic perk gave the weapon better handling, increased the rate of fire, and the stability while the wielder's super was charged. So if you had your super, this thing became a beast. This weapon was a Warlock favorite. A weapon that a ton of Destiny 1 veterans have been begging to come back is the First Curse. There's been a ton of popular exotic hand cannons in Destiny to say the least, but despite that, this weapon has not been completely forgotten about, and that should say something. The exotic perk was called the First Curse, and what it did is it made the first precision kill of the magazine refill it, granting bonuses to range and stability until the player reloaded it. It was a pretty fun and unique weapon to use. I honestly think it could have a home in the Destiny 2 Crucible. Next, let's talk about the former PlayStation exclusive sniper rifle. You know what I'm gonna say already. The Zen Meteor. here. A lot of people still to this day never got their hands on the sniper, and honestly, it would make for a pretty cool candidate to come back in Destiny 2 in my opinion. Obviously, I prefer new weapons coming in Destiny 2, but if they are going to bring a Destiny 1 weapon, I think this one would be a cool one. The first exotic trait was called Dynamite, which grants explosive rounds. The cool thing about it was if you got rapid kills with every round in the clip, it loaded an extra higher damage round for 5 seconds. This paired with the exotic perk with the laser beam, which pretty much lets you know everything you need to know about the weapon right there, made it where an extra round from Dynamite caused a massive explosion. This thing was a beast, and more so than that, it was just an overall fun weapon to use. I recommend going back and trying to acquire this for some of those who haven't gotten a chance to do that in Destiny 1. You knew this weapon was going to be brought up eventually. The Black Spindle. What a journey this weapon has been through over the years. From Black Hammer in Crota, to Black Spindle in Lost to Light, to Whisper of the Worm in Destiny 2, we've gone through quite the journey. This weapon, besides just being a super strong and new DPS meta, was the new standard for what time secret missions could be in Destiny. While this weapon won't ever be coming back as the Black Spindle to Destiny, no one will ever forget about this weapon. This weapon had White Nail, which made it where rapidly landing 3 precision shots would refill the magazine from your reserves. It also had Mulligan, which we know made it where missing a shot had a chance to return ammo directly to the magazine. This combination, along with how strong this weapon already was, made it an absolute beast. Next, let's talk about a different weapon type. Actually, just kidding, we have one more Taken King sniper to talk about. One that you may have forgotten about. The Hereafter. Another weapon that isn't talked about too much. The exotic perk is called Blinding Light, and it made it where precision kills with this weapon caused a bright flash that can blind nearby enemies. It's basically Cloud Strike without the lightning. It was a fun weapon to use. It honestly could make an interesting weapon in Destiny 2. It's now time for the 3 Taken King swords. The Raise Lighter, the Dark Drinker, and the Bolt Caster. These were fan favorites, besides the grind of course. Comment below if you remember this grind. And while we haven't seen these weapons in Destiny 2, we have seen these weapons live on in new weapons like the Falling Guillotine. Dark Drinker's perk was called the Supermassive Vortex, which allowed the wielder to unleash a spiral of void energy in all directions. Loved using this on Axis. Raise Lighter had a Phoenix Uppercut where if you used the heavy attack it would launch you into a Solar Light Uppercut. With Crota coming back, I definitely miss doing Destiny 1 Crota solos with Raise Lighter. Lastly, Boltcaster had Sword of Thunder, which allowed the wielder to shoot a beam of arc light from their sword, creating a lingering electrical storm. All 3 swords were a ton of fun and they'll definitely never be forgotten. That wraps us up for Taken King. Let's move on to Rise of Iron. Let's start off with the weapon that's coming back in final shape. The most customizable weapon that made the way for things like Revision Zero, the Kava Stav. Not only was this the first weapon you get in Destiny 1, but it was also made into an exotic in this DLC. This weapon could be turned into a pulse rifle, auto rifle, and scout rifle as well. I'd imagine that in Destiny 2 we'd have some sort of quest or mission like Revision Zero where we'd unlock more and more customizations on the weapon each week in the Enclave. I know that some are gonna say that I forgot the Outbreak Prime if I don't put it in the video, so let's put it in. In Destiny 2 we have the Outbreak perfected originally from the 0 Hour, but in Destiny 1 we had the Outbreak Prime from the Wrath of the Machine raid, one of the best quests in my opinion of all time in Destiny. The exotic trait was called the Corruption Spreads, and what that did was it made it where enemies that took repeated hits from this weapon spawned Siva nanites that attacked other enemies. Also, Fallen would take extra damage. It was definitely one of the best weapons in Destiny 1. Moving on, let's talk about everyone's favorite sword, the Young Wolf's Howl. I remember at one point a lot of people thought this was going to come back with Corridors of Time. Obviously we got Bastion instead. The Young Wolf's Howl is like the forgotten sibling if the favorite child was the Boltcaster, Raise Lighter, and the Dark Drinker. It's not a bad weapon by any means, but it just could never fill the massive shoes that the Taken King's swords left to fill. The exotic perk is called the Howling Flames. What this did was it unleashed a fiery solar eruption that weakened enemies and dealt damage over time when you swung it. It was a really fun weapon. Let's talk about some LMGs next. Starting off with one that didn't get a ton of love in Destiny 1. The Nemesis Star. This weapon was actually really fun to use and I thought it was pretty unique. The exotic perk is called Strange Gravity, which makes it where when you hold the trigger down, range and accuracy would increase and the rate of fire would decrease. Also, the kills would grant grenade energy as well. Would it be good in Destiny 2 in its current state? Probably not, but it could be cool with a rework maybe. Staying on LMGs, let's talk about the Thunderlord's 2 forgotten siblings, the Nova Mortis and the Abaddon. These LMGs got introduced during the final dawning of Destiny 1. These 2 weapons were the Void and Solar versions of the Thunderlord. Just like the Thunderlord, these 2 weapons fired faster and more accurately the longer the trigger was held. Lastly, before we wrap up this video, let's briefly talk about the Age of Triumph. When Age of Triumph armor was introduced, which many people are very happy returned with Crota in Destiny 2, exotic adepts were also introduced as well. The first of their kind. Each raid in Destiny 1 got 4 exotic adept weapons introduced, which were basically exotic versions of the already legendary raid weapons. With making these weapons exotic, they were able to justify bringing back their burns to these primary weapons that used to have them in the past, like Fatebringer with Arc. I'll just go over the 4 from each raid quickly. From Vault of Glass, we had the Atheon's Epilogue Adept, the Fatebringer Adept, the Praetus Timepiece Adept, and the Vision of Confluence Adept. From Crota's End we had the Word of Crota Adept, the Abyss Defiant Adept, the Oversoul Edict Adept, and the Fang of Ute Adept. From King's Fall we had the Anguish Adristan Adept, the Smite of Moraine Adept, the Doom of Chelchis Adept, and the Zowless Bane Adept. And lastly, from Wrath of the Machine, the only raid not in Destiny 2 yet, we have the Chaos Dogma Adept, the Fever and Remedy Adept, the Genesis Chain Adept, and the Steel Medulla Adept. And just like that, that covers every single exotic in Destiny 1 that hasn't yet returned to Destiny 2. But before we wrap up, let's talk about one more honorable mention. We have the Fate of All Fools. Bungie gave Eric this weapon, which was awesome and will always be legendary. Very, very big ups to Bungie. And with that marks all of the exotics. My final question to you is, what is your favorite exotic from Destiny 1 that hasn't returned yet to Destiny 2, and what Destiny 1 exotic do you think will come back next? Outside of Dragon's Breath, Kavastov, and Red Death, of course. Thanks for watching, and I love you guys.